Welcome back to DBS and the DFL studio with Nkrumah, Lucien and Ricky LaForce. We're talking about myths and superstitions, but just a quick reminder of the giveaways tonight. To win Farron's ice cream, name 2 of the ice creams mentioned tonight and which company produces the ice cream. To learn some of the sexy dances featured in Dancing with the Stars, salsa, bachata, merengue and cha-cha from Expose St. Lucia Latin Dance Studio, tell us in which studio in Rodney Bay does Expose St. Lucia hold its classes. If you'd like a token of appreciation from DFL, name 3 DFL sponsors. 1 must be a car rental company. I'd like to reintroduce our guests tonight, if in case you've just joined us. Of course, not strangers really to St. Lucia, but Ricky LaForce, I said welcome to you before and I'm welcoming you again. Tell us a little about you.
Well, my name is Ricky LaForce. I'm from the Cedars Lesland area. Grew up, I'm a single mother, and I went to the SD Academy. I'm a sports freak, also a nature freak. I volunteer a lot of work. I love to volunteer. I think it's out there something to do, and I love to help the poor. It's something I have a passion for. And one thing I give a lot of my time to, I'm a Catholic, practicing Catholic. I give a lot of time to my church. So this is basically what my life entails.
And I'm going to be very interested in your angles when it comes to tonight's subject, because Catholics, more than, I'd say, I won't say more than any other religion, but because there's so many of us Catholic people, it's like, how do I say it? We are very firm in our beliefs. Would you say?
Yes, we are.
We are.
And some, like for me, I always say there are some convenient Catholics who say, I'm Catholic just for convenience, but the majority of them are very firm in their beliefs in what the church teaches out there. So I would say I'm one of them who believe in a lot of the church teachings.
Okay, well, thank you. Nkrumah. Okay. Of course, this is Nkrumah. Lucien, tell us a little about yourself, please.
Yeah, well, I think I'm approaching my 10th year of teaching. I'm from Grosile. What else can I say?
What do you teach?
I teach history, social studies, and principles of business. My interest in the particular topic, which I think is a very important topic to be addressed and dealt with in depth, comes from my own experience in terms of trying to understand those things, reconciling a society where you have the dominant churches and then you have other myths, etc., that are sort of marginalized and seen as superstition, as they say. So trying to reconcile why would 2 things that seem substantially equal, seeing one given privilege as religion and one referred to as superstition. So I think I try to explore that, looking at the history and where those things come from, and then try to get a better understanding of it for myself.
But do you think that you delve into myth and superstition because you are interested in history? If you weren't interested in history, do you think that you'd still be interested and intrigued?
No, well, I was interested in understanding myself and understanding things around me. And an understanding of history is inextricable from that. You can't really understand many things in the present which have the origins in the past without actually going into the past. So myth and religion was just part of it. But understanding basic things about how our society operates and some of the biases and views that we have now, it meant that I had to go back and study the history. So it led to a greater interest in that area. Well,
of course, I'm going to ask then for some definitions then of myths and superstition. So, Ricky, I'm going to ask you, what is your understanding of the definition of a myth?
Well, for me, myths are something that's, there's a different understanding to it. Like, for instance, like if you watch a Zorro, for some people it's a myth, but some people it's real. And a myth is something that, like a superhero, a superhuman being type, where there's a storyline around them. So you try to understand what's the storyline, but is it true, is it false, does it react to our culture, does it react to a culture where it come from? Because like when you watch the Greek mythology and stuff like that, you wonder, is it true? With the Americans and them too, the Bigfoot and all this thing. So you try to express it, how they express, do your research and find out what is the myth about it, is it reality, is it not reality, where it's grounded in. Because in the 12th century, that's when a lot of the scholars started to understand what a myth is, because they watched everything literally as one, and then they came with all these definitions and stuff like that.
I hear you, but you know, in listening, I'm thinking we may call that a myth, but to to the people who live that, it's not a myth, it's history. It forms part of their history.
Of their lifestyle too.
And yeah, and their life. And also, I suppose, when we look at a myth, the recording of it as well. Because these things happened so many years ago, by the time, it's like Chinese whispers. It starts one way, and by the time it gets to modern day, it's changed a lot.
For me, I read about the samurai in Japan, and throughout the ages, the story have just filtered a little bit, like deviated a little bit, and when you really realize these guys were so rigid in their studies, is that it's from the time a child was born, they knew that their life was to be a samurai, or their life was to be a priest or a monk. And the monks in China, you not just become a monk, you're born to be a monk. So and the story will build and will be handed down. Like in Africa too, like voodoo, the religion. A lot of people, the Western watch it as this bad thing, but for the Africans, it's their religion.
We'll go into that, because now I think we're coming away from a little from the myth, but we will discuss that later. And Nkrumah, what would you say in terms of a definition of superstition?
Okay, I want to review
and you want to
myth as well.
Yeah, okay, let's hear your myth first.
I think both terms are very much related to religion. Religion, I think, for me, a myth is a story which tries to communicate a truth, but not in the way that we understand truth today in the very literal sense. So it uses a symbolic way of explaining the truth, in other words. Now, it's very easy then, if you don't know the context of that symbol or that myth, and you were to experience or relate to a certain fragment of it, a little piece of it, then you see, oh, this thing doesn't make any sense in the system that I understand the world. So then it's called superstition. You know, so every religion has its myth. Christianity has its myth, Judaism, Hinduism. But then if a religion, for instance, in our society, many African religions don't survive as they did before. So what you would have is little fragments of it. And these things then would be referred to as superstition, although there are other things too that are referred to as superstition that are not understood in their proper context.
Okay, I'm with you on that. But again, I'm going back into my childhood, and I'm thinking, so for example, when my grandmother was telling me certain things, like as a left-hander, I would be able to see the spirits more than a right-hander. Is that's a myth, or is that a story? Because a myth can be a story. Yeah, it is a story. Often it is a story, and it's made of different elements. Now, you raised the one of the left hand. Maybe it would be useful to go back to understand where did that whole idea of the specialness of the left hand come from? Or some people say, well, I heard today, etc. In discussion, one of the viewers stopped me today, and they said, "Oh, you know, you're going to be talking about superstition, and I'm a left-hander. What have you heard?" And I told them that story, and I said, "Do you know where that came from?" And they said, "Oh, that their grandmother said to them that it was something to do with someone was being naughty or something." Your grandmother may not even know the actual. And their grandmother said that the person was being naughty, and so because they were and the person was a good writer, and because they wrote with their right hand, because they were naughty, they taped their right hand so they could not write, and that's why it forced them to be a left-hander. Okay. I mean, and that is why left-handed people can see more. That's what her grandmother told her. Well, that association may have been made a much longer time ago, maybe even thousands of years ago. And then now it's coming down without you understanding why was that thing initially said. Then the literal understanding of it is taken to the point that in our very own society, it came down through European and Christian tradition that the left-hander was seen, the left hand, right? And if your left hand is considered... They were evil. So we were evil people. So there are persons... But now they're saying we're very creative people. There are persons alive today. Who went to school and were forced to write with their right hand because persons not understanding the origin of those things applied it in a very literal sense. If you're right, if you can't write, if you're left hand. So we really won't come to a good understanding of things now if we really don't look at where those things come from and what they initially meant. But why would we want to? I mean, that might be an ignorant question, but why would we want to go right back to the beginning when really these things don't hold true anymore? Because they still have power over you. They still apply a certain level of influence over how you act. Now, if you don't understand why something was done, you just carry on. You're sort of like a robot doing something you don't understand the reason for. So if you understand where it comes from, you can say, hey, this thing doesn't apply in that same way now, or it never applied that way. It may have been symbolic, so I don't need to practice in a literal sense. So that's why it's important to go back to look at it. Going back to the thing, like there are people who are born ambidextrous, and they can use both hands and both feet, and they will watch like
You write with your left and your right, and then what you know, like you all these evil persons thing like that. But now with the understanding, we're understanding like, hey, what's happening? These are genuine things. So you see, it's the old thing being instilled in us. Unless we take it out and we grow it will still be there.
Well, I mean, I've heard so many things about left-handers. I don't know what to believe, and that's just you know a tip. There's so many things that a lot of people they firmly believe in. I met another left-hander today who told me that they've actually seen spiritual things. They've been walking with someone who's a right-hander, and that person hasn't seen what they have seen, and it's because they're a left-hander that they can see, and they really, really believe in it.
They believe in it. A lot of them believe in it. They tell you, I was walking, I saw this. So they tell themselves that because it has been instilled in them.
Well, when we come back from the break, we're going to be looking a little bit about the history of, you know, where these things come from, the myths and superstitions. Is there anything that we should be worried about? And also we're going to ask you to think about maybe moments and times that you just cannot explain why something happened, but you know it happened. Is it a myth? Is it a superstition? Or is it you just going a little bit too lally? Stay with us at DBS for Dolor Factor Live. We'll be right back.